Hi, friends. Welcome to Pieces Here. I'm Avis Kalfsbeek, and we're taking a little rest between podcast series to help Kitty O'Compost improve her reporter voice for peace. Kitty is a character I made up who's a little offbeat, a satiric smarty pants, and she's getting ready to report on a big story about peace, AI, and the future of the commons. It's called CTRL-AI-DISARM. At the end of these Kitty Reads episodes, and maybe longer, you'll also hear the Next Peacelands, a roll call of global armed conflicts and arms exports. If that's too much for today, it's okay to end early. But if you can stay, I hope you'll let it deepen your resolve for peace. As usual, you can find the words and books I make for peace at aviskalfsbeek.com, and podcast music is by the talented Javier Peque Rodriguez. Listen for the peace. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from Washington Irving, one of the first American writers to make a name for himself at home and abroad. He spent years living between New York and Europe, collecting old stories, listening to legends, and shaping them into the kind of American folklore that still clings to the hills of the Hudson River. Rip Van Winkle first appeared in 1819, tucked inside Irving's sketchbook, the same collection that gave us The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It draws on old European tales, that's tail shaking, but plants them firmly in the Catskill Mountains, where a good-natured fellow named Rip slips away from his chores, wanders into the woods, and dozes off for far longer than he ever expected. By the time he wakes, the whole nation has changed around him. We'll read just a short portion today, enough to feel that blend of American myth-making and gentle humor that made Irving one of the earliest voices in our literary tradition. Well, darling, I could read the opening of a fairy tale or the warning label on a box of light bulbs, and it'd still give us a little breather. Peace likes to slip in sideways sometimes, especially when nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving. Whoever has made a voyage up the Hudson must remember the Catskill Mountains. They are a dismembered branch of the great Appalachian family and are seen away to the west of the river, swelling up to a noble height and lording it over the surrounding country. Every change of season, every change of weather, indeed every hour of the day produces some change in the magical hues and shapes of these mountains, and they are regarded by all the good wives, far and near, as perfect barometers. When the weather is fair and settled, they are clothed in blue and purple, and print their bold outlines on the clear evening sky. But sometimes when the rest of the landscape is cloudless, they will gather a hood of gray vapors around their summits, which in the last rays of the setting sun will glow and light up like a crown of glory. At the foot of these fairy mountains, the voyager may have described the light smoke circling up from a village, whose shingle roofs gleam among the trees, just where the blue tints of the upland melt away into the fresh green of the nearer landscape. It is a little village of great antiquity, having been founded by some of the Dutch colonists in the early times of the province, just about the beginning of the government of the good Peter Stuyvesant, may he rest in peace, and there were some of the houses of the original settlers standing within a few years, built of small yellow bricks brought from Holland, having lattice windows and gable fronts surmounted with weathercocks. In that same village and in one of these very houses, which to tell the precise truth was sadly time-worn and weather-beaten, there lived many years since, while the country was yet a province of Great Britain, a simple, good-natured fellow of the name of Rip Van Winkle. He was a descendant of the Van Winkles, who figured so gallantly in the chivalrous days of Peter Stuyvesant and accompanied him to the siege of Fort Christina. He inherited, however, but little of the martial character of his ancestors. I have observed that he was a simple, good-natured man. He was, moreover, a kind neighbor and an obedient, henpecked husband, Indeed, to the latter circumstance might be owing that meekness of spirit which gained him such universal popularity, for those men are apt to be obsequious and conciliating abroad, who are under the discipline of shrews at home. Their tempers, doubtless, are rendered pliant and malleable in the fiery furnace of domestic tribulation, and a curtain lecture is worth all the sermons in the world for teaching the virtues of patience and long-suffering. A termagant wife may, therefore, in some respects be considered a tolerable blessing, and if so, Rip Van Winkle was thrice blessed. Certain it is that he was a great favourite among all the good wives of the village, who, as usual with the amiable sex, took his part in all family squabbles, and never failed, whenever they talked those matters over in the evening gossipings, to lay all the blame on Dame Van Winkle. The children of the village, too, would shout with joy whenever he approached. He assisted at their sports, made their playthings, taught them to fly kites and shoot marbles, and told them long stories of ghosts, witches, and Indians. Whenever he went dodging about the village, he was surrounded by a troop of them, hanging on his skirts, clambering on his back, and playing 1,000 tricks on him with impunity, and not a dog would bark at him throughout the neighborhood. The great error in Rip's composition was in insuperable aversion to all kinds of profitable labor. It could not be for want of assiduity or perseverance, for he would sit on a wet rock with a rod as long and heavy as a Tartar's lance, and fish all day without murmur, even though he should not be encouraged by a single nibble. He would carry a fowling piece on his shoulder for hours together, trudging through the woods and swamps and up hill and down dale to shoot a few squirrels or wild pigeons. He would never refuse to assist a neighbor even in the roughest toil, and was a foremost man in all country frolics for husking Indian corn or building stone fences. The women of the village, too, used to employ him to run their errands and to do such little odd jobs as their less obliging husbands would not do for them. In a word, Rip was ready to attend to anybody's business but his own, but as to doing family duty and keeping his farm in order, he found it impossible. In fact, he declared it was of no use to work on his farm. It was the most pestilent little piece of ground in the whole country. Everything about it went wrong in spite of him. His fences were continually falling to pieces. His cow would either go astray or get among the cabbages. Weeds were sure to grow quicker in his fields than anywhere else. The rain always made a point of settling in just as he had some outdoor work to do, so that though his patrimonial estate had dwindled away under his management, acre by acre, until there was little more left than a mere patch of Indian corn and potatoes, yet it was the worst conditioned farm in the neighborhood. His children, too, were as ragged and wild as if they belonged to nobody. His son Rip, an urchin begotten in his own likeness, promised to inherit the habits with the old clothes of his father. He was generally seen trooping like a colt at his mother's heels, equipped in a pair of his father's cast-off galligaskins, which he had much ado to hold up with one hand, as a fine lady does with her train in bad weather. Rip Van Winkle, however, was one of those happy mortals of foolish, well-oiled dispositions who take the world easy, eat white bread over brown, whichever can be got with least thought or trouble, and would rather starve on a penny than work for a pound. If left to himself, he would have whistled life away in perfect contentment, but his wife kept continually dinning in his ears about his idleness, his carelessness, and the ruin he was bringing on his family. Morning, noon, and night her tongue was incessantly going, and everything he said or did was sure to produce a torrent of household eloquence. Rip had but one way of replying to all lectures of the kind, and that, by frequent use, had grown into habit. He shrugged his shoulders, shook his head, cast up his eyes, but said nothing. This, however, always provoked a fresh volley from his wife, so that he was fain to draw off his forces and take to the outside of the house, the only side which in truth belongs to the hen-pecked husband. Thank you for listening and allowing me to practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead, CTRL-AI-DISARM. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the Next Peacelands. Podcasts usually have ads you fast forward through. This one doesn't. Instead, I invite you to pause here just for a few minutes and listen with an open heart, not to memorize the numbers, not to analyze the politics. As I read each conflict, I'll say aloud, "Peace is here." You're welcome to say it with me or just think it quietly. If you'd like to read, sing, or paint your own version of the Next Peacelands, or tell me how to say peace is here in your language, I'd love to hear it. This is the Next Peacelands. Not for doom and gloom, not for pity or sadness, we speak and we listen to these geographic locations of wars and the numbers of deaths of human souls to help put the great disarmament, the period in which we live now, and peace at the forefront of our daily consciousness and actions. Following are the major and minor armed conflicts, each with over 1,000 deaths in the current year, based on the data available as of December 2025. Russo-Ukrainian War since 2014, 400,000 cumulative fatalities, 69,177 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Arab-Israeli conflict since 1948, 263,000 cumulative fatalities, 25,100 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Sudanese conflicts since 2008, 1,400,000 cumulative fatalities, 19,867 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Islamist insurgencies in the Maghreb Sahel since 2002, 464,000 cumulative fatalities, 19,069 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Myanmar conflicts since 1948, 199,000 cumulative fatalities, 13,411 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Mexican drug war since 2006, 417,000 cumulative fatalities, 7,790 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Congolese conflicts since 1996, 211,600 cumulative fatalities, 6,860 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Ethiopian civil conflict since 2018, 610,000 cumulative fatalities, 5,563 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Somali civil war since 1991, over 1 million cumulative fatalities, 9,872 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Syrian conflict spillovers since 2011, 656,000 cumulative fatalities, 7,745 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Afghan conflict since 1978, 2,800,000 cumulative fatalities, 3,632 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Ecuadorian security crisis since 2018, 9,230 cumulative fatalities, 2,740 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Yemeni civil war crisis since 2011, 382,000 cumulative fatalities, 2,598 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Colombian-Venezuelan conflicts since 1964, 457,000 cumulative fatalities, 2,482 deaths year-to-date. Peace is here. Haitian crisis since 2018, 20,000 cumulative fatalities, 2,480 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Does that mean the countries that weren't mentioned are more peaceful? Some are, some are not. Here are the world's largest weapons exporters according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's Arms Transfers database. These numbers use TIV, the Trend Indicator Value, a measure based on the production cost of military equipment. The cumulative TIV figures you will hear represent the total volume of military resources transferred since 1950, while the percentage is based on the most recent 5-year trend. United States, cumulative exports of $729 billion, accounting for 43% of total global exports. Peace is here. France, cumulative exports of $136 billion, 9.6% of total global exports. Peace is here. Russia, cumulative exports of $155 billion, 7.8% of total global exports. Peace is here. China, cumulative exports of $61 billion, 6% of total global exports. Peace is here. Germany, cumulative exports of $90 billion, 5.6% of total global exports. Peace is here. Italy, cumulative exports of $37 billion, 4.8% of total global exports. Peace is here. United Kingdom, cumulative exports of $144 billion, 3.6% of total global exports. Peace is here.